This happened back in the 1990s, long after the time babysitting became a common theme for scary movies. Personally, I didn't really watch things like that, so I wasn't really afraid that any of those far-fetched stories would ever happen to me. I was 17 years old, and every Friday night I would babysit for the Wilson family down the street. They were a relatively young, yuppie-ish couple who went to parties every Friday, and needed someone to babysit overnight for their 2 kids. I'm not exactly sure what kind of parties they attended, but they were typically out all night and wouldn't get back until 3, 4, sometimes maybe even 5 in the morning. It wasn't much of an imposition or concern for me though, because they paid me quite well, and I liked the kids too. A whole lot, in fact. The children in question were an 11-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl. They had a pretty typical relationship for children about that age. The boy, though the mother was not very happy about it, loved to watch scary movies and read comics. He was always trying to scare his little sister, especially when his parents weren't around. I had an older brother too, so I knew what that was like. The boy would sometimes try and scare me too, but that never succeeded. On this particular Friday, it was mid-fall and quite cold outside. As usual, I got to their house around 6 p.m. The parents went through their list of rules that I had already memorized. They told me they would like me to prepare dinner and gave me a recipe. They also gave me the exact same approximate return time they gave me every week. It was alright. Well, after we'd all had a wonderful dinner, they were a relatively wealthy couple and always had lots of good food around. We all sat down to watch a movie on TV. About halfway through the film, the boy Chris got up and left to go to the bathroom upstairs. When he came back, he plopped himself down on the couch and just kept watching the movie. When the movie was on its last commercial break, Julie got up and it was obvious she had to go to the bathroom too. "Don't go into the bathroom, you'll just get scared," Chris said in a sing-song and mockingly scary voice. "Stop it," Julie cried in the typical quit scaring me whine that was indicative of little girls who were tired of their big brothers always trying to scare them. Chris smiled wickedly. "I mean it. There's a clown hiding behind that shower curtain. And you'll see it if you just sit on the toilet." Chris finished by making some unfriendly, spooky sounds in an attempt to further frighten his sister. "Make him stop," Julie whined, looking over at me. She obviously had to pee really bad. She began dancing there in her PJs, trying hard to hold herself in. "Stop scaring your sister," I told Chris and playfully threw a small couch cushion at him. He laughed and hid his face behind it. Julie looked over at me, and her eyes asked me the question I didn't need to hear. "Yes, I'll come with you." I got up and took Julie by the hand and led her over to the bathroom door. She refused to touch the knob first. Julie insisted I open the door and switch on the light. "Can you check the curtain?" she asked me slowly. I walked over to the opaque blue curtain. I have to admit that for some reason, I was slightly apprehensive. Must have been that lingering fear everybody had about showers from much of the movie Psycho. I slowly put my hand on it and paused for just a moment. I opened the shower curtain. Of course, it was empty. "Will you wait outside the door?" Julie asked. I of course agreed. When she was done, she had me come in while she flushed the toilet. We both washed our hands and went back to the movie. Now the rest of the night went by quietly enough. Chris had obviously had his fun and must have decided he didn't want to try scaring Julie any longer. Either that or he had scared himself too by watching all those movies, which sometimes happened. By 10 o'clock, both kids were in bed and had been asleep for at least an hour. I also went to bed around 10:30, so I would sleep in the Wilsons' extra room until they got home. I got ready for bed and went into the spare room. I've never been the best sleeper in the world. I always like to know what time it is, and I would always wake up every hour or so and look over the clock in this room. They had a large digital clock with red numbers on it, so I could wake up and turn around to see the clock easily, then go right back to sleep. I must have fallen into a deeper sleep at some point. The last time I remember seeing on the clock, it was about 11. I woke up at 11:45. I saw the light of the clock and turned over and fell back asleep. Later on, I was suddenly woken out of my sleep by a sound. I looked at the clock and saw it was 12:30. I heard Julie's voice. "Can I sleep here? I think there's a monster outside my window." I was groggy, but of course I had no problem with her sleeping in my room. Chris had scared her earlier, and it made sense that she probably was seeing or hearing things. Besides, having her sleep in my room with me would be a lot easier than getting up to check on her every now and then, just to make sure she was safe. She crawled in bed with me, and I looked over at the clock. It was still 12:30. I fell asleep. I was woken up by another noise. Looking at the clock, it was 1:08 a.m. I heard Chris's voice this time. "I'm sorry for scaring Julie earlier. Can I sleep in here with you? I think there's a monster outside my window." Although I was exhausted, I chuckled to myself as I mentioned my brother used to try and scare me when I was younger too. I always wished that my brother would have ended up scaring himself, and although it was unlikely, I never stopped wishing it would happen occasionally. Chris was a lot nicer than my brother was though, so I agreed and let him climb into bed too. He was still a boy, and it was unlikely he'd learned his lesson so fast, but I didn't want to be unnecessarily mean to him. I looked at the clock. This time it said 1:12. I drifted off again. I woke up a bit later this time. The clock said 2:39. I was happy I'd actually been able to sleep for more than an hour without waking up. I looked over at the kids. They were sleeping just fine, so I went back to sleep. The next time I woke up though, something very odd happened. I first thought I must have rolled over or something, because I didn't see the clock. Being very obsessive about my ritual, I knew I had to roll over and look at the clock before falling asleep again. After my head cleared just a little bit, I realized I was facing the direction of the clock, but the clock just wasn't there. I groaned, realizing that we must be having a power outage or something. I would never be able to get back to sleep if I didn't know what time it was. Right after I groaned, though, a black shadow moved, and the clock became visible. It said 3:24 a.m. It only took me a moment for me to realize I hadn't seen the clock, because somebody was standing in front of it. I screamed before I realized this was a dumb thing to do. I woke up both kids, who panicked. "Get out of the house," I yelled at them, as I saw a shadow coming towards us. It didn't take the kids more than a few seconds to know something was wrong. Julie and Chris started screaming it was the monster. They both jumped up and ran like hell. I tried to follow them, but I wasn't fast enough. Whoever was in that room got a hold of me. I tried screaming, but he shoved his hand over my mouth. Trying to think of what I could do, I tried to stomp on his foot. Although he yelped in pain, it only made him hold on tighter. He was way too strong, and I was not getting away. I tried to console myself and tell myself that the police would come. The kids had gotten away. I kept struggling, and he threw me towards the bed. I didn't hit it though. I fell and hit the floor. My arm hit the metal frame of the bed, and I heard it crack. The man came towards me quickly, and I started crying as he grabbed me by my arm. I prepared for the worst when I heard a gunshot. I cringed. Then I noticed the man scream in pain. He fell on me. However, he didn't remain on me very long. He rolled over onto his side and grabbed his arm. Looking up, I saw the best thing I had ever seen in my life. Apparently, the father of the kids had gotten home in that time and retrieved his gun from his own bedroom, a gun I didn't even know he had. I felt a new rush of energy as I jumped up and ran past him. I ushered both kids out of the room and down the stairway and out of the house. They ran to the neighbors who had been awakened by the gunshot. They had already called the police. They came and found the man being held at gunpoint by the father. They arrested him. It turned out the man had been trying to abduct children in the area. Both kids had already been scared because of the stories they'd been hearing. They'd been sleeping very lightly and were woken by the man trying to get into the house. They assumed he was a monster trying to get in. When they'd heard the noises, they hadn't really seen anything. Apparently, he was trying not to wake me up so he could take the kids easily. He, in fact, had been in the room with us, trying to pick the right moment to grab them. He was cautious because he had seen me waking up every half hour or so, looking at the clock. That kept him from acting sooner, and it probably saved those kids too. After talking to the police, the scariest part was they told me once I had woken up, he wasn't intending to abduct me, he just wanted me out of the way. Since he'd begun attacking me, I assumed that meant he was going to kill me. I still sleep with a digital clock in my room. I can't sleep with that one whenever there's a power outage though. When I wake up and don't see the number, I assume the worst and start screaming. It's terrible what some sick fucker will do to screw you up for the rest of your life. When I was in high school, I began babysitting for the family of my best friend. She had one brother and one sister, 5 and 7 years old respectively. I was a year behind my friend in school. She had left to go to college and could no longer watch over the siblings. Since the family knew me very well, they hired me as the babysitter. They were both really nice parents and rather wealthy. They owned a big and beautiful townhouse as well. Well, one Friday night, the parents had a party that they had to go to. I showed up at 7 p.m. on the dot. They told me they didn't expect to be back until very late, as usual. This was like an opportunity being paid to enjoy myself. The children were so young that they were usually in bed by 8:30 and asleep by 9. I had the rest of the hours to myself, to talk on the phone, watch television, and basically do whatever I wanted, as long as I checked on the kids. On this particular night, I had been talking to another friend of mine, Steph, for a while. She had to be in bed early since she was a cheerleader, and the team had an away game the following afternoon. She had to get up to be on the bus by the time 10 o'clock rolled around. I resigned myself to an evening of watching cable television and eating junk food, after fixing myself a sundae covered with nuts and hot fudge, and even a few pieces of banana I was able to chop up. I sat down in front of the television and made myself comfortable. Flipping on the TV, there was this strange repair show. There was a guy and he was mixing concrete and what looked to be a wheelbarrow. Beside the wheelbarrow, he had a bunch of cinder blocks stacked up behind him. It looked like he was making some sort of wall. I couldn't really care less about that sort of thing, so I changed the channel. Only, when I changed the channel, the same show was on the second channel as well. I get the cable can sometimes be like that though, so irritated, I flipped the channel again, only for the same show to be on the other channel. I kept flipping it over and over and over again, and each time I flipped the channel, it stayed on that show. The man never missed a beat. He was mixing the mortar and lining up the bricks. I really didn't know what was going on. I was wondering if there was some strange issue with the cable or something. The man looked directly at the screen, and I felt as if he were looking straight at me. That was not nearly as scary though, as when he addressed me by name. "Cindy, I think you need to come downstairs right away." Fear flowed through my body, like I cannot explain. Although I didn't know how to react, I knew I was not going to go downstairs. There would definitely be something going on down there. I started fumbling for my cell phone so I could call the police. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Cindy. You won't have time," the man told me. I watched as he pulled the 7-year-old boy I was babysitting in front of the camera. He started patting the boy on the head and said, "I suggest you get down here real quick." Not knowing what to do, I immediately felt protective of the boy. I began toward the basement door. I stopped though because I was in the room with the fireplace. I grabbed a poker and went to the basement door. I flung it open and flipped on the light. After a moment's hesitation, I ran down the stairs. It was an unfinished basement, as I knew beforehand. There was a pile of cinder blocks down there and a barrel with mortar, but there was not a single person there. I felt like my heart was trying to escape my chest and push its way up my throat, out my mouth. Somehow, though, I managed to calm down. That's when I realized that whatever I'd seen on the television must not have been live. It must have been recorded or something. It was probably nobody in the house. Unnerved, but not nearly as afraid as I had been before, I still held the poker, making my way back up the steps. I closed the basement door behind me. I have to admit I did not turn off the light behind me. I walked over to examine the television. Looking behind it, I found somebody had connected the computer to it. The video had ended, so I turned the television off. I honestly began thinking this was just a prank. Maybe my friend that went off to college set this up. She'd likely taped the video with a friend and her brother and set me up to scare. I chuckled about it, realizing it was indeed a pretty good joke. I had played some pretty good jokes in my life on her, so I couldn't really be mad. I appreciated a good laugh too, even though I was not laughing when it initially happened. Still though, on the off chance that something really wrong was going on, I figured I should give the house a once-over first. Foremost, I checked the kids' rooms to make sure they were safe. Both of them were sleeping soundly in their bed. I checked under their beds, in their closets, behind any furniture. Then I went in and thoroughly inspected the parents' room. There was nothing. After checking the kitchen, the den, all the other rooms, I was completely convinced my friend had just played a really bad prank on me. I figured I was going to text her and tell her that she got me good with that one. I rechecked the front door, still a bit frightened to see if it was locked. It was. Lastly, I walked out to the coat closet by the front door to check that out. I opened the closet door as quickly as I could and scanned the floor while pushing the coat and clothes aside so I could see if anybody had been hiding behind them. Turns out no one was standing hiding behind the clothing, so I was pretty happy. I sighed with relief and looked up on the shelf. Then I heard the voice from the video. My first reaction was to freeze. I looked up at the high shelf in the closet and saw the person from the video laying on the shelf, his body stretched out, his hand resting on a crooked arm, and a wicked smile crossing his face. It was horrifying that I hadn't thought to look up there, and to also know that not only was he watching me as I searched, he could have grabbed me at any moment. His smile widened, and then he whispered to me, "I'm gonna get you." He moved quickly, jumping off the shelf. Fortunately, although he was fast, he was still on a shelf. I had a bit of a head start too. It wasn't much though, and I didn't even make it to the door before I felt his hand grab my hair and my head jerked back. I fell back and hit my head on something, and everything went completely black. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed. It took me a while to get my bearings, and a while for my wits to come back to me. Fortunately, before I had a chance to freak out too much, my mom came into the room to talk to me and calm me down. Apparently, at some point after I'd been attacked, the little girl had gotten up and was looking for me. When she couldn't find me, she woke her brother up. He was older and was smart enough to immediately call the police. The police came over to investigate. Unfortunately, the man and his laptop were gone. Fortunately, the kids weren't harmed. Even more fortunately, the man was easily identified as the contractor the family had hired to face the basement for them. That's why the boy had willingly made the video with him. The boy had also told him about me, his babysitter. That's how he knew to set everything up. Unfortunately, the man had already fled his home and was not found by the police in the end. The police said they'd found me in the basement tied up to a kitchen chair. The man had cinder blocks and mortar prepared and had tried to build a little wall around me. Pre-warning, this will be a short story because I have some details left out to ensure it's left anonymous. When I was around 15, I started babysitting a family with 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 girl. Their mom knew me, as the oldest was friends with my little brother, and had asked my mom if I could help out just because she had started taking on more shifts, and her husband was also doing the same. They lived right next to my high school and paid well, so I agreed, despite not really having that much experience. Pretty quickly, I realized this was going to be difficult. The kids were great, but I was just nervous around them. The oldest was fine, just played on his Xbox most of the time, or did homework. But the 2 youngest were a different story. The middle child, their daughter, was completely obsessed with horror movies, and on more than one occasion, I had to hide the knives from her since she wanted to reenact the scenes. The youngest son had tried to set fire to the Christmas tree. I know what kids can be like since I have a lot of younger and older cousins, but these ones just drove me insane. I had to constantly worry about them hurting themselves or each other. If they acted up too much, I would threaten to call their mom, which would normally work. After a few months though, I realized that if I just mentioned the dad, they would immediately behave and do everything I asked, so that's what I started doing. Now, I had never really met this dad. I just knew that the guy was a really tall guy and a really big build. He was always described to me as still being really nice though, so I never really thought about it. On this particular occasion, I had said to the youngest boy that I would call his dad if he didn't stop misbehaving, which resulted in a huge tantrum, so I ended up calling him and explaining. Luckily for me, the dad was getting off work early, so he said he would get home as quick as he could and apologize for the children's behavior. When I explained I had done this, the kid sobbed and ended up locking himself in his room. That day, the dad got home, and they were not joking when they said he was tall. I'm only 5'3" and was 15. When I saw him having to crouch a little to even get through the door because of his size, I remember thinking, oh shit, no wonder the kids won't misbehave when he's there. I said hi and apologized for the work call, which he just brushed off and said that it needed to be done and not to worry. We were both sat on the couch. I can't really remember why, but I think we were talking about what days they needed me for. Now at this stage, the two youngest had went outside to play, while I was with the oldest. I had just been tidying a little from dinner. I was pretty weirded out because this oldest started to get pretty antsy when asked to go to the shop. He kept making excuses to his dad, so I just offered to go instead. I could see the dad visibly frustrated, and I just wanted to defuse the situation. I would like to reiterate that everything seemed normal up to this point. I remember feeling really intimidated by the dad though. I'd only met him this one time and spoken to him for no more than 20 minutes. It turned out the oldest had said to his mom that he didn't want me left alone with his dad, as he had apparently been watching me a little too closely during our encounter. The parents asked me to babysit later on that week, which I agreed to. However, in the space of just a few days, that quickly changed. I got a text from the mom apologizing for the last-minute arrangements, but saying I couldn't babysit. I was a little agitated since I had changed plans around, but I wasn't too bothered. I just said it was fine and to let me know when she did need me. She asked me to come around to get my pay for the last 2 weeks, and I decided to nip that before going home. Immediately, as soon as I entered the house, I could tell something was wrong. Not wanting to pry, I just went in to say hi, talk about the books for a little bit, and then left. It wasn't until the next week, I think, or maybe the week after that where everything kicked off. I came home to my mom being very upset and angry, pacing in the living room, while my stepdad was trying to calm her down. I immediately went to ask her what was wrong, feeling a little bit worried. Instantly, she threw her arms around me and started crying and holding me. I had meant to be babysitting, but again got canceled on, so I was home earlier than what I had said originally. Pulling away confused, I asked her what was wrong again. Turns out my mom had been trying to get a hold of me for a while, but my phone had died. I had went to babysit, but nobody was home, so I decided to head back on the bus. I wasn't able to let my mom know though. She sat me down and started asking me all these questions about the dad and my time babysitting. Confused, I mentioned that I'd only met him once and only really spoken to him on the phone a handful of times when the kids were acting up. Nodding, my mom started pressing on and asked if anything else had happened. She kept questioning me and saying I could tell her anything. I just looked at her confused. I told her nothing had happened and asked what exactly all this was about. I always remember this. Her taking a really deep breath and saying, "Oh, thank God," before letting me know what happened. Now, as I said, the details are vague because this was on the news. Turns out the guy had killed someone while working and had been taken in by the police. During the interrogation, it turns out he admitted to beating his wife, and there were speculations of assaults as well. There was also mention that one of his types were petite girls that had dark hair, pale, which happened to match my description at the time. My mom was terrified something had happened to me. I'm turning 23 this year, and it still gives me the shivers. I remember feeling like I was going to throw up and a sinking feeling in my stomach. My mom held me close crying because she had been worried sick all day and scared something had happened to me. Needless to say, I stopped babysitting for the family right there and then. I felt so awful for the wife though. She was honestly one of the nicest people I'd ever met. About a week later, I got a text from her. As it turns out, I had left behind some books, so I said I would go and grab them. When I saw her, my heart sank. She had obviously not slept in a long time and was putting on a brave face for the kids, who couldn't tell what was going on. We ended up sitting in the kitchen, and I gave her a big hug just trying to comfort her. I mentioned that if she needed help with the kids since he was gone, I would try and help. She immediately refused. As it turns out, people had started attacking their home. She gave me my stuff, paid for the wages with a little more added. I had completely forgotten about this, and said she really appreciated it, but thought it would be a better idea if I just took a step back from the family, as she didn't want me getting hurt for just being associated with them. To this day, I still think about them, and it scares me after thinking about what could have happened. I still talk to the younger kids who are a lot older now, and even helped tutor the younger girl. I helped the oldest when he was starting high school, because I noticed kids bullying him for what his dad had done. It was awful considering it didn't involve any of the rest of the family. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I would also like to give a special shout out to my friend Killer Orange Cat, who is also a narrator here on YouTube that reads true scary stories. He has allowed me permission to use stories submitted to him in his subreddit in my videos. So if you like these stories, please be sure to go check him out, as he is a very good narrator as well, and he puts out content every week. If you guys enjoyed my narrating style and the content of this particular video, please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide to subscribe, make sure to hit that bell button and turn notifications to all if you would like to be notified of every video I post in the future, although I post a video every day when I can, so if you just come back to the channel every so often, you'll not have missed very much. If you guys would like to get in contact with me for any reason, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You will find links to all of my social media, including my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Send me a message on any of those, and I will try to read them as soon as possible. You can also send me a message on any of those to submit your own scary story experience for me to read in the video. If you do decide to submit a scary story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what the theme of the story is if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include proper grammar, and please include as much detail as you feel comfortable sharing, as that makes it much easier and more likely that it will end up in a video in the future. I also have 2 other channels if you like my voice, called Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour respectively, where I do weekly true crime vids and monthly documentaries on dark things that happen in history. If you like my voice, check them out. Maybe those contents will be for you. Overall though guys, I think that's pretty much it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.